It's time for Waking Up with Wesley. Today's forecast and weather-wide discussion with WLOX First Alert Weather Senior Meteorologist Wesley Williams.
Waking Up with Wesley is sponsored by Exclusive Auto Brokers. For the best deals on wheels, visit Exclusive Auto Brokers on Beatline Road in Long Beach.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Senior Meteorologist Wesley Williams. Thank you for waking up with Wesley. So today, we're going to start off by taking a quick look at the tropics and also something you might have noticed about our sunrise this morning or perhaps last night's sunset. It has something to do with the connection to the tropics, and I'll explain exactly why coming up. So be sure to stay tuned for that. But first, let's talk about it. It is the second day of hurricane season 2025. Today is June 2nd, 2025. So we've got some days to go. Hurricane season does not officially come to an end until November 30th, which is 6 months away. So we've got to get through this initial portion of hurricane season, which typically features low amounts of tropical activity in the month of June, low amounts of tropical activity in the month of July. And then we start to see a pretty sharp increase, especially during the second half of August, until we get to the peak of activity, typically in September. So if you are new to the area, you're not used to hurricane season, this might be a good time to consider some of your summer plans. Maybe you're trying to book a vacation somewhere, maybe out in the Caribbean or going on a cruise ship. Those who are local residents for a long time, like me, we know maybe generally to avoid booking cruise ship vacations around August, September, as that's typically going to be that time of year that you might find a hurricane or two or three somewhere out in the Gulf or the Caribbean or the Atlantic, and that could always lead to issues for some of your vacation planning out in that part of the world. So just a friendly reminder, try to avoid that August-September timeframe. I'm sure that the pricing is probably better that time of year because they know it's the peak of hurricane season and they want to entice you, but maybe you could pick a different time. That's always generally a better idea. I thought January would be a pretty good time to book a cruise trip, and go figure, this past January we had a historic snowstorm while I was out in Mexico enjoying a margarita. So maybe avoid January too, who knows? Anyway, let's get to the rest of the forecast about the tropics. Good news today, the Gulf and the Caribbean and the Atlantic still feature little to no activity, and that's what you want to hear. This time 5 years ago, Cristobal, you remember the tropical storm that destroyed the Biloxi pier, the lighthouse pier? It's never come back ever since, and it was all thanks to a tropical storm, not a hurricane, a tropical storm. Now, it was a 1-2 punch in the year 2020. Cristobal knocked the pier up pretty good in June, but then Zeta came by in October and finished the job. It completely removed the lighthouse pier from Biloxi, and it's just never come back. I miss it so much. Maybe many of you do as well. So that's some of the trappings that come along with hurricane season. Those storms can come and rough our coast up a bit. That's why we pay so much attention to this stuff. And I'm happy to report good news today that there's no system out there today. And the National Hurricane Center expects it to stay that way over the next 7 days. Now, if your algorithm is like mine, you've been scrolling past a bunch of posts that are giving the hype machine, trying to hype up storms from a computer model that keeps spitting them out greater than 10 days into the future. And if you are a long-term resident, you might already know that this is something that happens every year. Computer models that go out very far into the future, 2 weeks, they can produce inaccurate forecasts, especially out in the far future. So just take those posts with a grain of salt. You know, just maybe not the best idea to share them and you know, create panic or anything like that, because it's too far out in the future and it's probably not that accurate. Now, once we get within 7 days, computer forecasts are a bit better, a bit more accurate, and then certainly within the 3 to 5 day range, That's where we're most confident about if there will or won't be storms happening and what types of impacts would be possible. So that's why the National Hurricane Center's forecast cone does not go out to more than 5 days, because once you go out that far, it's very difficult to tell what will happen in the future regarding a hurricane or tropical system, let alone 10 days. Could you imagine? All right, so why are there not that many storms happening? Could it be the dust straight from the Saharan desert in Africa? That could be one of the things holding the hurricanes at bay right now. You know, it is early June, but like we saw 5 years ago, you can get a big storm forming this time of year. Not a big storm, but at least a tropical storm forming this time of year. But one of the reasons why we don't see that is because of this dry, dusty air that is across the Atlantic and the Caribbean and into the Gulf. Now, the reason why that's happening, of course, the source of that dry, dusty air is the Saharan desert. That's where it originates from, because it's a desert. However, why is it coming all the way out in the Atlantic? Well, you got to look at the wind currents, the wind circulations, to understand why things are going where they are going. And there's a high pressure system that is situated over the Atlantic, that big blue H you see there. Around a high pressure system, the wind circulates clockwise. So that's why the dust from Africa is carried westward into the Atlantic, into the Caribbean, and eventually it actually comes up into the Gulf, maybe even onto the Gulf Coast. Now, this dust is actually a good thing because it's dry, and hurricanes and tropical systems need moisture in the air to form. If the air is dry instead of moist, that's one thing, one ingredient that we can take from those storms trying to pop up. Sure, the water's warm enough, but if there's no moisture, that really makes it a little bit more difficult to see storms happening, certainly to see many of them happening. This will really put a lid on that. And the dust is forecast to stay there for the remainder of this week. So maybe that's one of the reasons why National Hurricane Center are not really calling for anything. But look at this morning's sunrise. With that dust sitting thousands of feet up in the sky, it adds an extra haze. And that makes our sunrises and sunsets even prettier. So you might have noticed that if you were looking up at the sunrise this morning. Maybe if you were looking at the sunset last night. I actually don't know much about the sunset last night because I was in bed asleep with my eyes closed. But if you watched this morning sunrise, I can tell you it certainly was quite the stunner. We had all of that dust, that haze upstairs in the sky, and that dust, those dust particles help to scatter the light from the rising sun in just the right way to really make it even prettier. Now, that dust that I keep talking about is, like I said, thousands of feet up in the sky. It's not going to be at ground level, because that's one of the first questions that we often get when we talk about the Saharan dust. People want to know, my goodness, is it going to impact me and my breathing, my health? And for the majority of you, the answer is no. But if you are a person with a respiratory illness, COPD, asthma, etc., that is something that could possibly affect you, but not in a huge way. You usually have to have the dust cloud become very, very thick in order for it to get low enough in the sky to where it's actually having any effect on us humans that live down here on the ground. So most of the time, the majority of the time, this stuff stays way up high in the sky and it doesn't impact us health-wise at the ground level, unless the dust cloud becomes particularly thick. And you'll know when this happens, because what usually happens is that there's an air quality alert that comes out, usually for sensitive groups, people that are sensitive with illnesses for that. So there's already alerts in place to notify you of when the dust is expected to impact air quality down here at the surface. And I have good news that there is no such alert for South Mississippi, at least as of 8:47 a.m. today. Maybe there's one that will happen later, but as far as I see right now, no air quality alert for the Mississippi coast as of the 8 o'clock hour on Monday morning. But it's something to monitor, and if you see that alert come out, then you'll know why. So just to put it all together for you, that dust helps to limit tropical activity. That's a good thing, and it could make our sunrises and sunsets look even prettier. That's also a good thing. And then the only asterisk that could be a possible negative thing is that it might, if the dust gets thick enough, negatively impact some people who are more sensitive, their health in regards to breathing. So that'll pretty much do it for the tropical part and the sunrise sunset part of this video. Now we'll quickly cover our weather forecast in just a couple of minutes. First of all, have you noticed it's not as comfortable as it was during the mornings over the weekend? We had cooler morning air because we were tapping into a cool down. Remember this past Friday when we were last together, a cool front, we were tracking a cool front that moved through the coast last Friday and that ushered in drier, lower humidity air, and it also allowed for some cooler mornings. Well, now all of that cool down is kind of moving off to the east, and we're about to see a warm up that's currently over Texas that's going to move into Mississippi from the west. And that is why our pattern is going to be changing. So you see those cool temperatures in places like Ohio sitting in the 50s this morning. That's cool. You're breaking out long sleeves for that for sure. Compared to Texas, South Texas in the 80s. And then here we are on the Mississippi coast, splitting the difference in the upper 70s. At the surface, our pattern today, there's a weak area of high pressure over the deep south. Most of the rain that develops on the map today will probably be along that front that's in the Gulf, the one that passed us on Friday. Well, it's sitting out in the Gulf. And by the way, in hurricane season, early season, we do tend to watch stalled fronts over the Gulf in case a little swirl surface circulation tries to spin up along those. Fortunately, don't see any of that so far, but we'll keep an eye on the stationary fronts. Is it possible to see some rain today? Our high resolution models suggest yes. There could be a few hit or miss storms that develop. There's a look at those rain chances today around 20 to 30%. You can see those little green spots, little kind of hit or miss thunderstorms that could occur. Kind of like a very close to a typical summertime pattern when you see those little pop-up storms that bubble up because of the heat of the day. It's a possibility that we could see some of those driven northward by a possible sea breeze front that develops over the area today. So there's your forecast. Highs in the mid to upper 80s, very typical temperatures for early June. And that rain chance today about 20 to 30%. So not everyone will get rained on, and there will be many rain-free hours to take advantage of on Monday. The big thing that we're tracking this week will be the humidity on the rise. That's going to be the most noticeable change to our weather pattern for most of you this week compared to this past weekend. Today, that number that tracks that muggy feel, the dew point, it will approach 70 on the Mississippi coast. Tomorrow, that number gets into the lower 70s, and on Wednesday, that number gets into the mid 70s as we tap into more mugginess from the Gulf that makes the air feel muggier. And this does two things for us. Starting Wednesday, going through the upcoming weekend, we will lose hold of any cooler morning temperatures, and it will make the afternoons feel even hotter because of the heat index. When you have hot temperature and dry air, the heat doesn't feel as hot. But if you have a hot temperature and muggy air, the heat feels hotter. And that's what's going to probably happen as we go to Wednesday and beyond. The temperatures we have will wind up feeling even hotter because of the higher mugginess in the air. And one last thing that could do for us, with the air being a little bit more moist, that could allow for higher rain chances at times on Wednesday and Thursday and Friday. So be keeping an eye on those changes in the weather forecast as we head into later this week. Well, I've been Senior Meteorologist Wesley Williams. Thank you so much for waking up with Wesley. We'll catch you on the next video. Take care, everyone.
Waking Up with Wesley has been sponsored by Exclusive Auto Brokers. For the best deals on wheels, visit Exclusive Auto Brokers on Beatline Road in Long Beach.